bringing Susan's story to you because she's an extraordinary leader. And Susan, this is a room full of extraordinary, dynamic, visionary women and gentlemen. And I've known Susan for 20 years, but she has forbidden me to give a long intro, so I got to cut to the chase. But she is president and CEO of Gulf Power, a Southern company. And you'll be interested to know that she's the first female and the youngest executive ever to lead a Southern company. You have her very impressive bio in your program, so I hope you'll look at it, and when you note all of her wonderful achievements, accomplishments, awards, note education, that it all began at Auburn. So help me welcome back to Auburn, Susan Story.
Good afternoon. We're still working, right? I do appreciate the opportunity to be back, and especially with this incredible room full of talented women and men who support the women who are in here. We appreciate you all being here. Margaret mentioned that I did graduate from Auburn, and I tell you, there is nothing more wonderful than coming back to Auburn, because this is truly a place where my dreams began. I was the first person on either side of my family to ever go to college. My mom was the daughter, the youngest child of 9 of a poor farmer in North Alabama, and my dad grew up in an alcoholic home and was on the streets at 14 and joined the Marines, and he said my mom and the Marines saved his life. And great. But education was always important in our family. So I came to Auburn, worked my way through, got an engineering degree, and 26 and a half years later, I'm standing up. I mean, this country, there's no place in the world, with all of our challenges, there is no place in the world that somebody like me could be standing up on the stage. And there's nowhere like Auburn to give me the education that was the foundation to be able to do what I did. So I'm appreciative to both, to be born in this great country and to have been a student here, and my heart is in Auburn. What I want to do is spend the next few minutes talking about the business of giving back. And I'm going to tell a lot of stories, which is appropriate. I'm glad my husband's last name was Story when I took it. All Wilma Rudolph ever wanted to be was a normal kid. And when she was a toddler, Wilma Rudolph contracted scarlet fever and double pneumonia. And while all the other kids played outside, Wilma Rudolph had to watch them through the windows. And then when she was 4 years old, Wilma Rudolph contracted polio, and her leg became disabled. And the doctors told Wilma's mom, said, she's never going to walk. And Wilma, by the way, was the 20th of 22 children in 1940s in Tennessee. And her family was African American. And so she couldn't even get treatment at the local hospital. Her mom found a medical school from the traditionally black college that was there, and without a vehicle, without a car or a truck, had to find a way to get Wilma back and forth twice a week for 2 years to that hospital, and she did it. And every one of her brothers and sisters took turns every day massaging her leg, because they decided that Wilma was going to walk. And when Wilma Rudolph was 11 years old, she got to drop the brace off of her leg. And she thought, finally, my dream of being a normal kid will take place. But an amazing thing happened. She didn't just keep up with the other kids, she outran them. And in 1956, at the age of 16, she competed in the Olympics and won a bronze medal. And then in 1960, Wilma Rudolph became the first American woman to win 3 gold medals in the Olympics at Rome. And then something else extraordinary happened. When she had that success, everybody wanted to highlight Wilma Rudolph. And her hometown of Clarksville, Tennessee, said, we want to have a homecoming parade for you. We want to have a dinner and a banquet for you. She said, I have one demand. They have to be integrated, because there had never been an integrated event in Clarksville, Tennessee. And for the first time in history, there was a parade that was integrated for her homecoming. And there was a banquet that night, the first time ever in that town that blacks and whites had sat down together and ate. Wilma Rudolph knew how to give back. She achieved a personal success through hard work, through discipline, but her greatest achievement, she would say, at the end of her life, was what she was able to do for her community and the people in her community and bringing them together. See, giving back isn't something, some people think, well, philanthropy is, I'll go and I'll be successful, I'll make a lot of money, and then I'll give the money. And that's an important part of philanthropy. Don't hear me saying it's not. But giving back is something that we have to do every day in whatever we choose to do. It's not something you do, it's not I do this and oh, by the way, I give. It is in everything we do every day. We find a way to give of our resources, our talents, who we are, and what we do. So how do we do that? The business of giving back requires true leadership. True leadership. True leadership is not a position you attain. True leadership is the personal influence and power that you wield because of who you are and the unique combination of talents and abilities that every one of us in this room are. We were created special. We are special. And there are things that if you don't do it, would never be done just the way it needs to be done with your unique combination of talents and skills. So what is it that people look for in leaders? I read a great study one time. There's lots of leadership books and all that, and that's great. But there's some principles that I find through the years, they stay. They're just foundational things. They're not a fad. They're not a book. They're not, well, this book says this and this book says this. They asked, there were these two men, Kuzis and Posner, that did a study, and they went to people and said, don't tell us why you think you're a good leader. Tell me what you would describe as the person that you are willing to follow. Wow, how radical is that? To decide how we do leadership, why don't we ask people what kind of person they want to follow? And they did studies over industries, nonprofits, different countries, and what they found is there are 4 characteristics that all of us look for, the majority of us look for, when we choose to follow somebody, whether it's in business, in a nonprofit, in a little league coaching staff, in a PTA, and I don't think any of them will be a big surprise to you. First thing people look for in someone they're willing to follow, I want someone who's honest. No big, I want somebody that's honest. I know if they tell me something that I can believe it. And they said, well, how do you know if somebody's honest? It's okay to say I want someone with integrity and honesty. How do you know? Simple statement. Do they do what they say they're going to do? So they want somebody that's honest. Number 2, we want to follow someone who's competent. Do they have the skills to lead us where we need to go? Do they have those abilities? That's why the role of education is so important. What you will find, there are a lot of students here. It's not over when you graduate, it's the beginning. I think the biggest thing you learn in college is you learn how to learn. And if you look at business studies, those people who fall off the track are those who quit learning. People who are successful in whatever their field of endeavor are those who are lifelong learners. They never quit learning. They never quit inventing themselves. Looking at the world, how it changes. How do I go along with those changes? How do I adapt to that? So we want someone who's honest, competent. We want someone who's forward-looking. People are bigger than individual jobs. Our spirits are too big for individual jobs. We need to know that we're part of something bigger. And we want to follow someone who can tell us where we're going. Not just getting through this day, but what is it we're really trying to accomplish? Where are we going? And the last thing, I know you're thinking, wow, this is short. No, there's more to come. The last thing that people look for is they want to follow someone who's inspiring. And that doesn't mean you have to be a great public speaker or anything like that, but it means, are you enthusiastic, energetic, and positive about what you're trying to do? I'll never forget, I was talking to somebody one time, he said, the people I work with, they just, he was a supervisor. They're just like a wet blanket. They just don't get excited. I'm looking at it thinking, gee, I wonder why. How are you going to get excited about something? How are the people who follow along with you going to be excited about something if you're not excited about it, if you're not committed, if you don't have a positive attitude about it? So we want to follow someone who's honest, someone who's competent, someone who's forward-looking, and someone who's inspiring. Together, those create credibility. And all of us in this room want to follow someone who is credible, who has credibility. And what I want to share with you and spend the next 5 or so minutes talking about are those characteristics of how do we become credible. I told you the 4 characteristics, and they're not rocket science, but they're not that easy to do every day. But what are some actions, what are the steps that you and I can take to build that credibility that reflects those 4 values? Number 1, you need to know the people you want to lead. I go in smaller groups and I say, how do you get to know the people you want to lead? The first thing people say is talk to them. Is that it? Listen. You don't really learn anything when you're talking. You listen. Do you know their hopes? Do you know their dreams? Do you know what they're concerned about? Do you know their fears? Do you really know the people you want to lead? After World War II, there were Allied troops who were basically freeing the prisoners in the concentration camps. And there's a story written by this man who was there. He said, we came up to Dachau, one of the concentration camps, and we saw all these train cars that were lined out there. And two men went up, and they opened the door of the train car, and one of the men became violently ill, throwing up, because inside the train car were corpses, and they were stacked very efficiently, head to toe, head to toe. And the man who wrote this said, those of us who could stand it started unloading those bodies out of the train cars, and those who couldn't stand it were digging a grave. And he said, I will never forget the first live person we found in a stack of bodies. He only weighed about 75 pounds, and he looked like a skeleton with skin stretched across him, but he had a faint pulse, and he had a faint breath. And the man said, every single man in my platoon would have given his life that moment for this man to live. And he said, it was that point in my life that I realized that there is no such thing as a nobody. There is no such thing as a nobody. The Human Genome Project that's been going on for the last 20 years has found that human DNA is 98 to 99% identical. How much time do we spend on that 1 to 2%? So we need to know the people we want to lead. Number two, we need to stand up for our beliefs. We need to stand up for what we believe in. We admire people who stand up for those beliefs, those principles that matter. 4 college students walk into a lunch bar, and they sit down. They just ordered food. It's not supposed to be a big deal. They sit down, and all of a sudden people start pouring hot coffee on their heads and take cigarette butts and start putting them out on them, because it's 1960, and it's the lunch counter at Woolworth in Nashville, and these young students are African-American students who have decided they're going to integrate the lunch counters. Stanley Walker, Peggy Alexander, Diane Nash, and Stanley Hemphill. And it was amazing because what they did was to basically take on the entire establishment. And they were successful. And there's a young writer, at that time, young writer David Halberstam, who passed away a couple of years ago, and he was following them. He was in his 20s, and he was a journalist. And he said it was amazing. They won the battle of the lunch counters. He said Diane Nash was from Chicago. She was amazing. People thought she was the most courageous. And he had an interview with him. He said, how do you get that courage? And she said, I've got to tell you, she said, the night before all the sit-ins in my dorm, she said, I sat in my dorm and I was scared to death. She said, here I'm thinking, how can I take on the establishment? I mean, the powerful policemen, the businesses, the politicians, how do I do this? And then you know what she said? She said, but I told myself, this is what I am here to do. This is my calling. And I have to do this. I don't have a choice. Well, they won the battle of the lunch counters in Nashville, and then they headed into the deeper South to register voters. And a member of the Justice Department in Washington called and said, Diane, don't you realize that it's most probable you're going to die? You're going to be killed going down doing what you're doing. And she said, you're right. But you know what? If I do die, others will see and they will follow. And David Halberstam said, he said, I never became cynical in my entire career as a journalist because I kept remembering these young people. And cynicism had no role in their lives. And he said, you know what? Nothing tempted them. No ego, no anything. They lived for the cause, and they were willing to give their lives for what they knew to be right. And he said, it made me a better person, and it made me understand that the system can work when you have people hardly born of power and money who decided to change the world. And they did. Stand up for our beliefs gives us moral courage. The third thing is we need to speak with passion. We need to speak with passion. Again, doesn't mean you have to be a great speaker. One of the best ways we speak with passion is we show people what we are at our best. I really believe that people will live up to or down to the expectations we have of them. Children do, don't they? Isn't it amazing what people can accomplish when you set the expectations high? Or if we continually tell people they can't do things, how low they can go? People will live up to or down to. Speaking with passion is, I know we can get there. I know this is what we can do. I am committed. I am positive. I'm energetic. I'm enthusiastic. This is what we can do. One of the great legacies of Dr. King was, he said, when a dream lives on inside of others, it never dies. And speaking with passion ensures that that dream lives on inside of others. So, we need to know the people we want to lead, stand up for our beliefs, speak with passion. We also need to make sure that we lead by example. Leading by example is one of those things, I can't hear what you're saying because your actions are so loud. You've heard that? Another great story that I love is the story of Jackie Robinson. Jackie Robinson was the first African American to go and play Major League Baseball. And he was an outstanding baseball player. I mean, Jackie Robinson's motivation was he was so good and so talented, he wanted to see how good he could be. So he goes to Branch Rickey of the Brooklyn Dodgers. The Dodgers were in Brooklyn back then. That's how far back it was. And Branch Rickey said, I'm going to let you play, but it's not going to be easy. Now, a lot of people compare Tiger Woods with Jackie Robinson. I saw Tiger Woods' first major tournament, the Masters, in 1997. And the fact is, the difference was people wanted Tiger to win. It wasn't that way with Jackie Robinson. In fact, with Jackie, not only were the other teams and the other fans booing, but his own fans and his own teammates were booing. And he says there was one game that he almost quit baseball before he ever got to be at the level he was when he retired. He was playing second base, and he booted 2 balls. He messed them up, and his own fans are throwing tomatoes, and they're throwing food, and they're booing, and it just got so loud the team just stopped for a minute. There was a shortstop named Pee Wee Reese. And Pee Wee Reese, he set his glove down, and he walks over from shortstop to second base, and he puts his arm around Jackie Robinson, and he didn't say a word. He just stood there, and he looked at the stands. You know what happened? The boos stopped. People quit throwing things. A few heads started being conked. And they finished the game. And Jackie Robinson would say later that that one act saved him leaving his career. And I asked myself 2 questions. Number one, would I have the guts and the dedication of Jackie Robinson to know that for me to fulfill what my destiny is, that I'd be willing to put up with all that? And the second thing I asked myself is, would I be able to do what Pee Wee Reese did in the middle of that, to walk over and put my arm around Jackie Robinson? We lead by what we do, even if we don't speak a word. And the last thing is we have to conquer ourselves. It sounds kind of funny. We need to conquer ourselves. Jim Whittaker was the first American to reach the summit of Mount Everest, and he led the first American team to the summit of K2, the second highest peak in the world. And somebody asked him one time, they said, how do you conquer mountains? He said, you don't conquer mountains. Mountains can't be conquered. You conquer yourself. You conquer your fears. You know what your dreams are. You have to conquer those doubts, those things that prevent us and hold us back from being everything we can be. That's what you conquer. And what you have to do is you have to build confidence in doing that. And one of the ways you build confidence is you have to have knowledge and integrity. Knowledge, number one, do I really know myself? Do I know my strengths and my weaknesses? Do I know my beliefs and my prejudices? Do I really understand who this person is myself? And once I have that knowledge, do I understand what's going on in the world? I have to be, as a leader, I have to understand inside and outside. And it's putting those 2 together that determines our integrity. Once I understand my principles, my values, and become the best person I can be, and I look at how the world operates, how do I pull those together? That's really what integrity is staying true to that and being able to operate in it, and that's how you conquer yourself. And a great story, a woman named Bonnie St. John. She grew up in San Diego. And Bonnie was not the person that you would think would be the biggest success in life because of what she dealt with early in life. Number one, when she was just a child, her father left her mom and her older sister and her. When she was 2 years old, her mom remarried and he abused her and her sister. And then when she was 5 years old, her left leg quit growing and had to be amputated. But Bonnie's mom, she was a school teacher in inner city San Diego, and she worked hard for her girls. And when Bonnie was 16 years old, Bonnie had a friend who said, why don't you go snow skiing with me? And Bonnie thought, I have a prosthesis. How can I go snow skiing? And she had saved, and her mom had saved so she could even get the prosthesis. But she went, and she fell in love with it. She said, going down those mountains, I felt normal. You know, she skied on one leg, and she said it was just the most incredible experience. And she decided at 16, I'm going to make the U.S. Paralympic ski team. Well, she had to try out in 2 years. So she raised money, she went to a camp, and she tries out 3 years later, and she got they were picking 3 women, and she got the third spot. So it's 1984 Austrian of the Paralympics, were at the same time as the Olympics. She's at the slalom, you get 2 runs down the hill. So she goes after the first run, she's competing. She not only is leading, she's broken a world record and an Olympic record, Paralympic record. So she gets up for her second run, and someone warns her. They say, there's an icy patch at the bottom, you need to be really careful. So, but she's thinking, you know, if I'm going to do this, I've got to give it all I've got. So she gets up and she starts down, and she's having just an incredible run. She gets down to the bottom, she hits the icy patch, and she slips and falls. And she said, you know, I just wanted to lie there because it's hard enough to get up if you have 2 legs, but on one it's very difficult. She said, but my discipline took over and I finished that race. And she said, you know what, I learned something valuable that day. She said, I finished the race and I won the bronze medal. And she said, you know what, the woman that won the gold medal, she also fell. She said, and here's what I learned that day. Winners aren't people who fall. Winners are people who pick themselves up and finish the race after they fall. And the gold medal winners get up the fastest. So true leadership is about being honest and competent and forward-looking and inspiring. And we can do very practical things, you and I, every day. We can know the people we want to lead. We can stand up for what we believe in. We can speak with passion. We can lead by example. We can conquer ourselves so that that doesn't hold us back. So to pull it all together, as we give back, the business of giving back is taking what we have, not just our money, although that's important, but our talents, our resources, our passion, and going out there and sharing it to make a difference in the world. Because the definition of a leader, if you influence any other person, you're a leader. Think about that. If you influence even one other person, you're a leader. Because they look up to you and they want to see what you do, and you can inspire them to do great things. And the last story I'll share with you, I think, is the perfect example of how we as leaders make a difference, but also how anybody is a leader that makes a difference, and it's not in the big things. I was speaking to a group one time, and I was talking about inspiration, and I got a question. Somebody asked me, and it was very interesting. He said, what inspires you, Susan? Never had that asked as much as I speak. And as I thought back and gave my answers, it hit me. The examples I gave were simple things. They weren't big things. They were the fact that after Hurricane Ivan, when we had no electricity in Northwest Florida, that there was an accountant who lost everything but was back at work in 3 hours, and when a reporter from Washington said, what are you doing when you lost everything, she looked at him and said, because we got to get the power back on. It's the linemen that you have to make them stop working because they say just one more house, even though they've been working 24 hours. I get one more house back on before I stop. Those are the things that inspire me, and I realize it's not the big, flashy things that inspire us the most. It's those small acts, what some people call those small acts, that just make us stop and go, wow. There was a woman named Barbara Glantz, and she does motivational talks, and she talks to people about customer service. And she was talking to a supermarket chain. I won't say who it is because they don't have a name, but I know who it is. And she was talking to them, and 3,000 people, and it's frontline people. It was cashiers and baggers and butchers and those folks. And she talked to them about customer service and putting your personal signature on what you do. And she said she always leaves her email and her number. And so she said about a month after she spoke to this group, she got a phone call. And this young man said, hi, Barbara, I thought about what you said. He said, my name is Johnny, and I am 19 years old, and I have Down syndrome. And you know, I started thinking about what you said, and I thought, now how can I put my signature? How can I make a difference? He said, you know, and I'm just a bagger. And he said, but you know what I thought? I'm going to get a thought of the day. And if I can't find one I like, I'll just make one up. And he got his dad to help him, and they typed 6 on a page, and then his dad would make 50 pages, and he would cut them out at night, and he would sign his name, Johnny, on the back. And he said, every one of my customers, I'm going to put a thought of the day in there. So she said, well, that's great, Johnny. So he did. About a month later, she gets a call from the manager of the store. He said, you're not going to believe this. Said, it's amazing what's happened with Johnny and his thoughts of the day. He said, the other day I walked in the store, and I look at the lines, there's 3 lines open, and Johnny's line is like come by here once a week, but now I stop every day so I can get one of Johnny's thoughts. He said, who do you think the most important person in my story is right now? He called her back 3 months later. He said, this is a different place. He said, because of the role model Johnny was, he said, I got a butcher that loves Snoopy, and he bought thousands of stickers, and now he puts Snoopy stickers around. Whenever there's a broken flower in the back, the florist goes and finds an older lady or a child and pins a corsage on it. And he told these stories about how every person found something very personal that they could do. And Barbara said, well, I guess that's not really bad for the bottom line either. He said, we've never had more customers than we do right now. So every morning, we get up and we say, am I going to be a Johnny today? Because the fact of the matter is, true leadership, giving back, isn't restricted to certain people, of certain positions, of certain income. Giving back are the things that you and I can do every day for everybody. Things that make a difference in the world. Because at the end of our lives, we will not regret the things that we did do. We will regret the things that we did. Thank you for what you do. The Women's Philanthropy Board is just amazing. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for all the young people. I tell you, you just don't know sometimes how the small touches, speaking to someone who maybe feels unloved at a time, the small things we do can change the world. And I thank every person in this room for your role in changing the world. Thanks.
Susan's story, what a great, great kickoff for the Auburn LSU weekend, right? We have just a little memento for Susan as a token of our appreciation. We thank you so much for those inspiring stories, and we want you to come back. Okay? Thank you. I want to thank all of you for being here this afternoon. I just think Fall Luncheon is a great kickoff for fall football at Auburn and just the sort of welcoming of new freshmen, and again, for all of you students who are here today, we are just very, very grateful. There are a few people that I want to take just one more minute to recognize. We have at the head table our state treasurer, Kay Ivey. Kay has been absolutely last year we had a year-long effort with the state treasurer's office, and Kay went around the state with us talking about the importance of financial literacy, and we do appreciate having her here. The executive committee of the Women's Philanthropy Board changed this morning. This happens every 2 years, so our leadership group has been working hard and passed the baton, as we say, this morning to a new group. I'd like to ask Sandy Logan, our founding president, and all of the old members and the new members of the executive committee to please stand and let us recognize you for all the work that you've done on our behalf. A group of people that are especially important to us are our corporate partners. We have seven and growing, we hope. But I want to take just a minute to acknowledge those representatives from Alabama Power. Margaret Bentley, Jan Ellis, Despite are all here today. Hans van der Ruyden, the hotel at Auburn University. Rick Cook from the Auburn University Office of Outreach. Susan Moore could not be with us today, but Moore Wealth Management is one of our corporate sponsors. Stanley Sistrunk from the Flower Store. Cindy Smith Barney, and Katie Bellashaw is here representing Smith Barney. And finally, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Alabama. Let's thank all of those people for all of collectively all of our administrative group here
with us this afternoon to support the Women's Philanthropy Board. It's been a great kickoff. In your program, there is a list of all of the activities that are coming for the rest of the year. We've got something every month or two. Come when you can, come when you want to join us. We will be happy to see you. So have a great weekend, and War Eagle.